Mr. Moderator, members of Presbytery, I am Reverend Willem Boudisque-Mossing, and I speak to you on behalf of the Peacemaking Network of the Presbytery about Matthew 25. This program was put in place by the General Assembly in 2019. The General Assembly invited mid-councils and congregations to identify themselves as working toward one or more of the three goals built into this program. These three goals are building congregational vitality, dismantling structural racism, and eradicating systemic poverty. Having heard the call earlier this year, Presbytery's coordinating body voted in favor of becoming a Matthew 25 Presbytery and placed the responsibility for promoting this program in the hands of the Peacemaking Network. It should be understood that by putting the Matthew 25 program in place, the General Assembly recognized the fact that for decades, Presbyterians throughout the country have spent looking at poverty. The Presbyterian Hunger Program is a prime example for that. Racism, our General Assembly Officers for Public Witness, Social Witness and Racial Equity deal with that. And the matter of vital congregations, which is supported by the General Assembly Office of Vital Congregations from many angles. In this past year, 5 congregations in the Presbytery also have answered the call of the General Assembly to identify themselves as Matthew 25 congregations. These 5 congregations are Butler, Davy Street, First Durham, Kirk of Kildare Presbytery and West Raleigh. By accepting the General Assembly invitation to be a Matthew 25 congregation, these 5 congregations made a conscious decision to take action and make a difference in dealing with the 3 goals of this program. 2 of these 5 congregations, Kirk of Kildare and West Raleigh, made a video of what they do through their mission work in achieving these 3 goals of Matthew 5:25 program, which will now be shown.
It's who we are, it's what we do. For many years, the Kirk has had a strong focus on missions. For us, Matthew 25 is not a new initiative so much as a spiritual framework to put around several of our programs. As such, it helps us to unite in purpose with other congregations. It helps us take the next step beyond thoughts and prayers, even beyond financial contributions. Through these programs, our members put hands and hearts into serving our brothers and sisters. It builds congregational involvement, especially for those who may not be the Bible study type. These activities pull in the doers in our congregation, those who deepen their faith and find connection by carrying out acts of practical service to other people. It creates connections, both among people within the congregation and between our members and the community. We are a big congregation. Members who didn't really know each other have connected during service activities. These relationships extend beyond the particular activity and strengthen our church family. We also have connected with other religious and civic groups that share our belief in service, even with some of very different doctrine or beliefs. These connections can be the first steps in building understanding, tolerance, and acceptance that our society so desperately needs. It helps us to move beyond charity into partnership. Many of the people we seek to serve have become partners in the efforts. Quite literally, people that we have met as they came through a food distribution line are now on the other side of the tables, helping with the work of distribution and reaching out into their communities to connect more families who can benefit from the programs we offer. Helping others builds happiness. This is true not just for individuals, but for congregations as well. Looking at the needs of people in our larger community and world can help to put internal challenges into perspective and build a broader sense of purpose. It involves our youth. Middle and high schoolers are strong and full of energy, exactly the things needed to run a feeding program or help with after-school care for younger children. Matthew 25 programs help keep our youth involved and give them relevant, real-world examples of how to extend faith beyond the walls of the church building. It helps us to ask hard questions. The issues of systemic poverty and especially structural racism are complex and often difficult to discuss, much less to act upon. And yet, these are exactly the sorts of issues that Jesus has always called upon his disciples to address. Do you see a pattern here? All of these things are about building relationships, building broader connections with people who are outside of our typical religious, social, and economic bubbles. It can help move us from us and them to we. It is scriptural. The parable in Matthew 25 gives us a fairly simple list of how to be in service to God. As with many other parables, Jesus cuts through the complex religious rules of his day. Do these things, Jesus says, especially for the least of those among us.
On August 5th, 2020, during a Zoom meeting, the Mission, Peace, and Justice Committee, with our session's approval, went online and signed West Raleigh Presbyterian Church up to become a Matthew 25 church. We did so for many reasons, but perhaps the biggest reason is that while it provides us with a tangible, easily understood framework to encompass efforts that our congregation is already doing, this public declaration pushes us to live more fully into the kingdom of God. As shared by a child of the church, with drone footage provided by one of our youth, our church mission statement is,
"We are a community of God's people, nurtured in the love of Jesus Christ, supporting each other and reaching out to the campus, city, and world beyond."
Truly, living out this mission statement includes working on all three tenets of being a Matthew 25 church. The following portion of our 2020 annual report gives examples of how we are trying to live into that vision. The Mission, Peace, and Justice year started out much like any other year, as we participated in the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial March in January. And by the time February and the HKLJ Moral March came around, we had our Marching in the Light of God banner to carry. With the help of our children, youth, and talented chili and soup makers, we had a wonderful Super Bowl of Caring lunch and raised over $600 for our feeding ministry. Who knew how important those funds would become? Despite a global pandemic, West Raleigh's Bag Lunch Ministry is still going strong. At least $12,000 was raised for the feeding ministry, so West Raleigh has been able to keep providing sandwiches throughout the year. Due to COVID, we only housed Family Promise families in our church building in January. We did provide meals and groceries for the families temporarily housed in apartments during later Family Promise weeks. In May, West Raleigh welcomed Reverend Alex Patchen McNeil, the Executive Director of More Light Presbyterians, who led sessions for church leaders and youth about how we could better welcome and include LGBTQIA plus people in our congregation and community. In June, members of our church participated in a human peace chain, bearing signs and bearing witness in downtown Raleigh to the outrage that followed the death of George Floyd. In the summer, the committee started thinking about how organizations in our community could probably use extra help due to the challenges from COVID. MPJ wanted to use committee discretionary funding to match the congregation in intentional ways of giving, so the community impact challenges were created. In an incredible amount of support, West Raleigh members and friends donated almost $12,000. A place at the table's need was greater than ever, with $3,000 required to feed their guests per day. We exceeded the goal of providing funds for one day. In an effort to better understand and value the history of Oberlin Village, we hosted a panel discussion with Oberlin Village descendants and worshiped with Wilson Temple United Methodist Church. West Raleigh raised funds to help NC Black Alliance with their work supporting voter protection and strengthening the network of elected officials representing communities of color throughout the state. Aided by our youth who created signs to encourage everyone to exercise their voting rights, members participated in the election in different ways. And in our last challenge, we supported Southeast Raleigh Promise, which provides a cradle-to-career pipeline of services and interventions combined with neighborhood revitalization strategies. Some additional examples of how we continue to build congregational vitality include becoming a more like congregation and the development of the beloved community garden.
We invite you to join with us and the session in affirming the mission of bearing more light. Following the risen Christ and seeking to make the church a true community of hospitality, the mission of More Light Presbyterians is to work for the full participation of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer people in the life, ministry, and witness of the Presbyterian Church, USA, and in society. Amen.
Blue-eyed grass and blanket clouds light up the morning hour, and swallowtails that fly will cheer the wakening eye as we ask these bees to bless our earth. In honey there's rebirth.
I would like to welcome you to the official dedication of the beloved community garden.
West Raleigh has long struggled with how our church should be responding to structural racism and our own individual implicit biases. And in the past year, the Dismantling Racism Task Force was created.
We are here to introduce you to the Dismantling Racism Task Force. The task force, which began its work in October, has 9 members. We are using the session statement on dismantling racism that you see on your screen to guide our work. This statement is powerful and clear in claiming that we follow Jesus and thus have responsibilities to all of God's people. We have used the language of this statement to develop a set of goals that we will share with the session and the congregation.
We see our work in 3 areas. The first is to foster congregational participation. A second role is to hold dismantling racism as urgent while helping to sustain it over the long haul. And third, it's our task to keep the question of whether we are making a difference in front of us, and then make course corrections.
In addition, our continued pledge to be an Earth Care congregation fits under all three tenets.
West Raleigh has been a certified Earth Care congregation since 2014 and has just been recertified for 2021. We decided it was a good and proper time for the session to reaffirm the Earth Care Pledge.
Peace and justice is God's plan for all creation. The earth and all creation are God's.
We will encourage and support each other in finding ways of keeping and healing the creation in response to God's call to earth keeping, justice, and community.
West Raleigh is committed to living more fully into being a Matthew 25 church, marching in the light of God.
We are marching in the light of God. We are marching in the light of God.
Now that you have watched these videos, I hope you got inspired and accept our invitation to join these 5 churches and our presbytery on this journey of choosing to become a Matthew 25 congregation. The Lord be with you all.